Well, hello, everybody. I am so happy today to have Leslie here from Stop the Harm. The day that this will be viewed will be on August the 31st, which is the International Opioid Awareness Day. And we know that our country is in the throes of an opioid emergency with far too many of our loved ones dying. And I just want to say thank you, Leslie, for spending this time with me, because I think it's so important that we acknowledge this day and that we share information with my constituents and with whoever listens about how important it is to address this crisis, this emergency in the most holistic, loving way, because all those people who are struggling with addiction, they are somebody who is loved. And so thank you for spending this time with me today. Now, usually I do a bio and do an introduction, but we know that the first question that I'll be asking you today is to tell us a little bit about Moms Stop the Harm and how it was started and what your role is in it. So I'll leave you to do your own bio.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you for asking me. It's a privilege. In 2014, I lost my 25-year-old son, Jordan, to a combination of pharmaceuticals. He had been addicted to oxycodone, and he was cut off by his doctor, and he sort of, the short story, doctor shopped until he got enough drugs to keep him from withdrawal. And that combination of drugs actually stopped his heart. Of course, we were devastated, and I was devastated. And it wasn't till about a year later when I connected with two other moms who'd similarly lost their sons to drug harms, that we got together and realized we had just a great need to stop the harms, to be able to support the lives of people who use drugs. And we just started working on, we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, none of the three of us had ever been in the situation, nor had we ever started an organization. So we got a website and we got a Facebook page, and we had gathered a few people that we knew, and we sort of launched. It took us about a year actually to really get moving. And when we did get the word out there, we were surprised, to say the least. We were shocked at how many people started joining us. And it's just grown and grown over the years to where, from the three of us in 2015 really is when we met, to now we have we're not even sure exactly, people come and go, but we have somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 members across Canada. Mm-hmm. We have a voice. We are listened to by federal and provincial ministers of health and ministers of mental health and addiction. We are sought on committees, which we're ever so grateful for. And we just started. What our intention was to support the lives of people who use drugs. And we've never veered from that, although we have branched off to support families who have loved ones in addiction or in drug use, families who have lost loved ones. So we have we have quite a going concern now, and we hope we have our voices louder than ever.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of sad in a way to think of the growth of this group, because of course the growth of this group means the death of a precious person to someone. But I'm so relieved that there's a collective of the people who are experiencing this so that they can help us understand what's happening from that view. I think it's really important. So thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, across the country, I know that things are getting really hard. We've had a lot of overdoses, especially with the toxic drug supply increasing. And so many people have been lost and are gone forever. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective and the work that you do, what do you think we need to do in Canada to address this?
Well, I will say we in Moms Stop the Harm, we try not to call it an opioid crisis. Okay. What it is a toxic drug poisoning crisis. It's a crisis of toxic drugs. There are opioids certainly in the mix. There are other drugs, benzodiazepines and so on, it is a toxic drug emergency.
Yeah.
People who use drugs and people who are addicted, who are using these drugs because they have no option, people who are sort of, we call them weekend warriors, people who, you know, get off work after a week of hard work and want to just relax, or even have some cocaine or whatever, are at risk of dying, and they are dying because the supply is toxic. So we've got, you know, people who are sometime users and people who are addicted. They're all dying from people are dying from a toxic supply.
Yeah.
So this situation can only be remedied in one way that we can see. For eons, literally millennia, people have used drugs. It's just a fact of human existence. And since the 19 teens and the early 1920s, when prohibition, and I could go on about the history of that, but prohibition happened around opium and opioid drugs during the Opium Wars, which was trying to actually control the Chinese workers who had finished the railway. Anyway, since then, we've had prohibition on these drugs, and prohibition means, I mean, we can look at alcohol as an example where it was prohibited. Toxic alcohol was brewed up, people died, there was gang wars, etc. Same thing's happening today. You can see a direct line today. So we have this situation. The way the government with alcohol solved the problem was to regulate and legalize alcohol again, because they realized that it wasn't working. There is not much difference today around the issue of the toxic drug supply. So what I believe strongly, and one of the tenets of Mom Stop the Harm, is that the governments need to supply a legal, regulated supply of drugs for those people who need them. That is the only way to stop the deaths.
And stopping the death, I think, is probably the most important thing, because you can't help somebody who's no longer with us. So it's really about keeping people alive.
It is. And that's, I say that all the time. Dead people don't recover. You can build as many recovery centers and as many beds, and we do need them, no question. We need treatment, and we need recovery facilities that are evidence-based. But yeah, the people who are dead won't ever get there. Yeah.
So you see a place then for both increasing treatment. Obviously, I mean, I hear about this all the time. Not enough spaces, not enough places for people to go. Sometimes not treatment that's long enough, or treatment with no second stage plan. So when people leave treatment, they don't get the supports that they need. So that, I agree, such an important part. But also, in the meantime, we have to just keep people alive. It sounds like that's your focus. It's just keep them alive for the help that we hope is on the horizon. Yeah,
that is our main thrust of advocacy. Mom Stop the Harm has been funded by the federal government and provincial government to build out support groups for people who are in the situation of either having lost a loved one or have a loved one still with them, still struggling. I find it kind of ironic, that they're very willing to fund us for groups that we wouldn't actually need these groups if people weren't dying or becoming tragically addicted to toxic supply if we had a safe supply. I can bring everything back around to that, because that is the thing. If it's rolled out properly, and it's not simple, it is complex. It's not an easy solution, but it is a solution. If we can get people on a safer supply, everything improves. And I truly believe that that's true.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, I hear a lot from our communities. I represent a lot of communities in the riding that I'm in, and they're seeing an increase of crime and violence, and people feel really scared of people that they see out on the street who are obviously living with addiction. I'm just wondering, how do you address those fears in the work you do? Because I think it's really important for us to work with people around those fears and look at how to direct those fears in a more productive way.
Yeah, I agree. And it is scary. I mean, when you're maybe walking down the street, walking your dog, and someone who is either in withdrawal or has mental health issues comes at you or is hounding you or whatever can happen. So many things can happen. It's a scary thing. When your car gets broken into, or your house gets broken into, or your garage is getting broken into, these are bad things. There's no question about it. And I think the answer, I mean, the cause, I should say, is we don't have enough services for people with mental illness. And a lot of people with mental illness, maybe a majority of the people who are addicted right now have mental health issues. They can't find the services. They're just trying to feel better. They are taking drugs so they can feel better. Everybody who takes a drug, an illicit drug, or even ones that are legitimate, pharmaceutical, they just want to feel better. They want the pain to go away. And whatever that pain looks like, a drug can help. And they may have no other options. So the question of violence and crime, I think is directly a function of that we don't have enough services for people with mental illness. We don't have enough services for people with complex needs, mental illness and addiction. I mean, it's been years and years and years of stigma against people who behave in that way or behave differently. How are we going to solve that? Well, we're going to solve that by safe supply, for one thing, for the people who are using drugs and addicted, and real evidence-based, compassionate care for those people with mental health issues. And that is just not happening.
Well, and I know,
sorry, I was going to say, so I don't think we can depend on municipalities and depend on the people who, like you were telling me about, who pick up trash and needles. We can't depend on them to fix it. They can't fix it. The only way we can fix it as a society is to depend on and lean on our governments to do the right thing, to fund proper care. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, housing is so tied into this as well. And, I was at a workshop or a conference within our region several months ago. And I remember I've really been reflecting on the need for housing and what we're seeing in terms of people living rough and the struggles that they're facing and how that intersects with often drug use. And, I'm a homebody. I have a nice garden. I like to be home. And when I don't feel safe or when I feel stressed out, I immediately want to go home, and that's where I replenish. So I remember saying to the crowd, I know who I am. Like, I wake up every day. I know how I'm going to react to most things. I sort of have a sense of myself, my surroundings, and what makes me tired and what gives me energy, all those things. But if you took away my home, I don't know who I would be. Like, I can't tell you for sure. If I didn't have that safe place to go where I knew I was going to be able to get food and be warm, I don't know who I would be. And so that's something I reflect on a lot. Is I know that it's scary right now. I know that a lot of community members are doing tremendous work, cleaning up things that are hard to clean up. I know they're worried about what's happening, but I also have to think about what it would feel like for me to not know where I was going to be sleeping the next day. So I think that's a big impact.
There's, it was actually a meme on Facebook, but it really hit me. And that is that we who are housed, we who have privilege and we're housed, when we have, let's say, a fight with our spouse, or we have some really frustrate, or our partner, whoever, and we have some big frustration, or we're yelling at our kids or whatever, we do that within the four walls, or the walls of our home. It's not out on the street. People who have no homes have those same issues. They have fights with their neighbors, or they have fights with themselves, or whatever, and they're in public, and so they have no place to hide or to have those difficult moments. except in public. And that's to me, such a tragic thing, and I don't know what the statistics are or what the experts would say, does this cause mental illness? I mean, I know there's obviously some mental illnesses that come on, schizophrenia and bipolar and, um, other issues. But if you're stressed to the point of where you're using drugs and where you're addicted, when you're addicted, and you don't have the privilege of a roof over your head, things are going to go sideways. So we just have to look at, we have our safe places and people who are, so housing, and we always say too, nobody without a roof over their head is going to recover. How can you recover when you're in a situation of being frightened and being vulnerable and being marginalized and being arrested and, for being homeless, for, not having a home? How can you ever recover from that? So housing is absolutely a critical part of this puzzle.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of municipalities are doing the best they can with limited resources, but we definitely need to see all levels of government, and it would be nice to see a more coordinated approach to these really complex, hard, and emotional issues. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So in the work that you do with Moms Stop the Harm, can you share with us what projects you are advocating for most and what you think they would mean for communities and protecting those who are experiencing addiction?
Could you repeat that question, please? I got off on one part of it there.
No problem. These are heavy, hard issues. We all are doing the best we can. So my question is, what are the projects that Moms Stop the Harm are advocating for most? And what would they mean for our communities and protecting those who are experiencing addiction?
Right. Well, as I've said several times on this chat that we've had, safe supply, that would be our number one project that we're advocating for at every level of government. And we have allies, we absolutely do. And one of them is, and I just have to mention Jagmeet Singh, and he's I wish he could be our next prime minister. Am I allowed to say that? But anyways,
you did. I did not ask you to say that.
No, you didn't. I'm a big fan. And also Elizabeth May and lots of MPs. We have allies, so we're really reaching out to allies to be able to understand the dynamic here of the toxic drug supply, understand the deaths, understand, as I said before, the ripple effect of 32 or 33,000 people dying and their families having, and the ripple effect of the family's grief and everything that goes with that. So safer supply, and that's a complex one too, because there's lots of different areas, lots of different pathways that to get to safe supply, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I always say, if it isn't impossible, then that means it's possible, and we have to work really hard towards that. It will improve everything. As I said, community safety, the safety for people who use drugs. Hopefully the stigma, people will come out of their houses and go for at least for counseling, or to a doctor, or to whomever, from whomever they could find these services. It's another problem is there's not enough doctors, and there's certainly not enough doctors versed in addiction. So that's just another place we have to work. And we're on panels all the time. We are stumping for this, but again, that's a big, as you well know, having the physicians that we need and physicians that are willing to prescribe safer supply. It's another step in this solution.
Well, and I think something you said in your answer really resonated with me, which is getting people out of their houses, because the stigma is really high. And we actually know that a lot of people that are dying of the toxic drug supply are professional men who have good paying jobs, they're supporting their families, and they are recreational users, and they're out and they're getting toxic drugs, and then they're coming home and their family is finding them dead. So
Yeah.
I'm, like that stigma, it's not just people. Like, I think the stigma tells us that this is what people living with addiction look like, but actually it's a lot broader. And I think all of us want all of our loved ones to be alive, and trying to create that safe supply so that we can take out that stigma, because stigma, I agree, it makes things go underground. And when things go underground, it comes out. It always comes out. We always end up seeing it, but how we see it can be really awful. And I think right now that's what we're seeing in so many of our communities.
It is getting worse. And as people get more desperate around their own finances, let's just say, and their future environmentally, and all these stresses on everybody, then fear becomes a factor, and this just rolls into that. I was gonna, sorry, I had a thought there, but yeah, we are absolutely advocating for safer supply. We are working with different groups and committees on how that might look. We want to support the government. We want to support the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions in their research on how this should look, or how it could look. There's a lot of people who sort of on the political right, who say that safe supply is not an efficient way to go, or not a good way to go, because drugs will be diverted or whatever. There isn't enough evidence at the moment on safe supply so that it can be adopted by different levels of government. But the thing is, how are you going to get the evidence? How are you going to get the evidence to support that this is a good path without doing it? And if you don't do it, people will continue to die. In this province, 7 people a day are dying from a toxic supply. 22 in Canada, across Canada, are dying from a toxic supply. So it just seems to me the most logical thing to do is to work hard on how do we roll this out? How do we make it right? How do we do it in the safest possible way so that people don't die? You can wait forever for the evidence that you want to see, and that's the scary part.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And again, when we have these discussions, I think, and they are complex and hard, and I don't want to minimize that. I know that a lot of people are struggling with this, trying to wrap their heads around how it works. But at the end of the day, if we remember humanity, and that we need to just try to keep people alive, so that we can have the opportunity for a positive future. If they're not there, we don't have it anymore. So that's the reality. So we're winding down to the last question. And the last question is really, I mean, we've been talking about it anyways, but I think it's important, is what are the stereotypes about people living with addiction that you would like to see change the most? And how do you think we could have conversations so that we could see the stigma start to lessen?
Yeah. Well, one problem, I guess, is the media represents people with addiction as those people mostly in the downtown east side. And we've all seen it, even when even when they're not showing the people in the alley shooting up, with puddle water, we are still seeing the EMTs and the people who respond, the first responders, in the downtown east side. So that is, I mean, yes, they're the most visible, and that's an easy low hanging fruit in terms of drama. But the fact is that it's not, as we were saying, it's not those people that are struggling, who are vulnerable on the downtown east side. It's not just them that are dying. And what we have to see, if people can speak out, and what I've seen actually is kind of interesting. Every once in a while, you'll see an obituary where the family has actually said, our son or our daughter, our loved one, has died from toxic drugs or from a drug overdose, they might say. That breaks my heart, but it also says to me, wow, what brave people these are to have done that. So it takes all of us to look at the stigma, check our own stigma. I've talked to doctors, on panels and stuff, and just said to them, check your stigma at your office door. Check it, hang it up. Don't have that for people who come to see you who are struggling. It does nobody any good. Stigma is fear at its base. It's fear-based. We've had it for eons, but we're smart. We can learn to see people who use drugs as people with an issue, with a disorder sometimes. Yeah. So yeah. Forget what the question was, but I think I might have.
No, I think you answered it. And I think, it's just about stereotypes. And
Stereotypes, right? Yeah.
and you did answer it. So I think, what I keep pondering is, when you love someone, regardless of where they are and what they're experiencing, do you may be frustrated, but do you love them less? And how many of our babies do we want to lose? And I think, Moms Stop the Harm, that, it, and who's disposable? Like, it's hard to talk about stereotypes, because the stereotype, like you said, is it's like poor parts of town where people are shooting up, and it's all very, very obvious. But those people are precious to the people who love them. Like, so they're precious. And I think that's what I reflect on a lot. I see people in my communities that I serve that are really struggling, and sometimes I'm frustrated with their behavior, but I always try to remind myself, to somebody, they're just praying every day that this person makes it through, hoping that they're going to come home, hoping they're going to be safe. And I think, what Moms Stop the Harm is really it's a hard group, because I can't imagine how painful it is. And I'm really grateful that you shared your story, but it's like every single one of our children is precious to us. And what would we not do to try to keep them alive?
Exactly. What I see when I look at people who are, out there on the streets or anywhere that are obviously struggling, is I always think there's a little toddler in there. This person was once a little beloved toddler, and they were beloved, and they are still probably beloved, maybe lost to their families, but inside there is still that the essence of who that person is. And if we don't remember that, and if we can't help ourselves to learn to see that, yeah, then, like you say, we're losing our humanity. So we all hope, you hope, I hope, that people will start to look at those folks who are marginalized, or hear about deaths, or hear, whatever it is that affects them, impacts them, that they have compassion for what's happening out there with individuals and families.
Yeah. Well, and we do need to have more services. I think you talked about that earlier very eloquently, that we do need those services so that we can see supports in place, so that those things that scare us are happening less. And so many of those success stories that we don't always hear, because that's the other thing, is sometimes these things are working and people are getting better, but the numbers are so large of those who are struggling that we don't see the success. So hopefully we'll be able to measure some of that success and see where we need to put that investment. But we need more housing. We need more supportive housing for people who are struggling, and we need more beds, and we need safe supply. I agree with that, to keep them alive until the time comes, because some people aren't ready. And even if they're not ready to get help, I don't think that means that we should say, well, then it's okay for you to die.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think we covered it.
I think we did.
I'm sure there's more to say, but we've covered a lot of what hopefully the people who will be listening to this, if they have questions, of course they can always. We have an email that's info@momstoptheharm.com, and questions can be certainly sent there, and we want to answer everybody's questions to the best of our ability and to make things better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie, for coming, sharing your personal story and why you're so dedicated to this cause. And I'm really glad that you have a circle around you that does the work with you. And I really hope that we get to a point in this country where we don't have to have Mom Stop the Harm, because we've already got
Yeah.
the harm being stopped. So that will be my hope and prayer that comes out of this. And I'll continue the work that I can on that. And I thank you so much for doing all the work that you do.
You're so very welcome. It was great to talk to you, Rachel.
No, thank you. And thank you, everyone else. We will make sure that information is left above so that if you want to send a question or ask more, you can do that. And of course, we'll add our information as well. And I just hope that whatever happens in the future as we move through this really hard time, that we just take a moment, even in our frustration, to remember the humanity of all of us and just try to see that toddler in every child. Thank you, Leslie.
Right. You're so welcome.
Thank you, everyone else.